Details on these and other stories at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 18 rand 53 to the dollar, 23 rand 20 to the pound, and 19 rand 85 to the euro. Markets in Asia were mainly higher at the closing bell. The JSE is mainly higher in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are also mainly lower this hour. Gold is trading at $2,307, platinum $957 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $85.38 a barrel.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
Any person aggrieved by any political advertisement or political election broadcast that is broadcast by SAFM may lodge a complaint within 5 days from broadcast with the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA. To lodge your complaint, please contact ICASA's Compliance Department via telephone number on 012 568 3233. That's 012 568 3233. Or email broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. That's broadcastingcompliance@icasa.org.za. Alternatively, complaintsccc@icasa.org.za. That's complaintsccc@icasa.org.za.
So, a lady from Air Officini just turned 55, and although I'm still a spring chicken, there's a part of me that envies her, especially since she now qualifies for a Nedbank Electronic Optimum Plus account with capital guaranteed. Talk about foamy, huh, voice man?
If you mean FOMO, then definitely boss man. And she can earn up to 12.85% interest. Anyone over 55 can open theirs via the Nedbank Money app in less than 2 minutes. See money differently. Nedbank. We're a licensed FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
VfB Stuttgart loves it when their fans are happy and they want to impress them against the giants of German football. Meanwhile, Bayern München are still not impressed. They lost in their title race. They want to triumph in this battle. This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch VfB Stuttgart versus Bayern München this Saturday, 4 May at 3 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
We continue the conversation on the talking point for Municipal Watch this morning. We're looking at the debt owed by government departments to municipalities, zooming in on the situation in KwaZulu-Natal, where government departments owe 3.8 billion rand to various municipalities there. Councillor Tamin Tuli is with Salga in KZN. He's the chairperson. Asad Gaffa is a civic campaigner, also chair of the Westville Ratepayers Association, and Tsepo Mahlangu is chairperson of the Lotus, Attridgeville and Soulsville Civic Society. So, Councillor Ntuli, let me come back to you. In your efforts to try and get this issue resolved, what kind of responses have you as SALGA, which is really the role of an intervening party in this matter, what is the reception you've received?
Yeah, it was a commitment to correct, and I've mentioned that they committed to ensure that the government departments are actually paying. Unfortunately, we're not seeing the desirable outcomes. We're not seeing the results. The most culprits is the Department of Education, the Department of Public Works, and the Department of Health. You'll understand the critical services that they actually provide, and unfortunately not honoring at the same time what is supposed to be honored by them.
Is it fair to
yes.
Sorry, Councillor Ntuli, is it fair to say that municipalities themselves are also partly to blame for this problem, because they seem to tiptoe around actually taking the steps they need to against government department, that it's more of a negotiation than anything else, whereas if we're dealing just with ordinary residents, they don't get that luxury. If you owe the municipality some money, when you get home, your lights or your water is going to be off.
In certain instances, they take such routes. I will even made that call last year as SAGA that they must consider switching off the services. Unfortunately, for certain institutions, like I've mentioned, the issue of schools and hospitals, you find it not easy to switch off services at the expense of the life of those who are being actually taken care of in the hospitals. It's a dicey, in fact, a situation when it comes to what we may be able to do. However, they've never got tired in actually trying to push that they pay. They will pay, but not pay everything that they owe, of which is making the debt to be as high as it is.
Look, I suppose that is a very good point that you're making, especially when it comes to the properties that would fall under the education and the health departments. So, Asad, what then do you see as being the role of activists like yourself and, of course, also representing ratepayers associations?
Look, Cathy, I mean, I hear the argument that we can't switch off police stations, we can't switch off the schools, and we can't switch off the hospitals per se. But nothing stops the municipality from switching off the administrative buildings of these departments. So the police station headquarters, I mean, you can switch them off. You can switch off the health department's administrative office. You can switch off the Department of Education administrative office. They have to take a stand. We can't be, saying, oh, but you know what, we can't switch them off because of this. These departments are flagrantly breaking the law. I mean, I agree with the other guest on the show. I mean, he's called it out. It's criminality. And when we talk about all of these things, more importantly, it's not to say that the municipality doesn't need the money. There's so much. I mean, you've had me on one of your previous shows. We're talking about communities without water. We're talking about communities without electricity. 30 years into democracy, we keep talking about, addressing the imbalances of the past. How are we going to effectively address these imbalances if we don't have the money? And the problem is being created by this very same municipality. I mean, these government departments are not playing their part. How will we ever move forward? If the problem, Cathy, and this is where the issue is, because the municipal officials, the political heads in the municipality know the political heads of those departments, they tend to turn a blind eye, and that's not effective government. Government departments must hold each other accountable, like they hold an ordinary individual like myself and other ratepayers accountable. So too must they do this, including their own municipal staff, because we're always talking about government entities within the municipality itself. And again, this is the role that SAGA is supposed to be playing. I mean, we've written to SAGA. We've personally asked them for a meeting to sit around the table to address these issues directly with the municipality. Municipal staff themselves and councillors are owing in excess of 46 million rand. 46 million rand is owing to the municipality just by councillors and municipal staff. And they don't get switched off. How is it that the rules apply to some and it don't apply to others? In fact, we've been addressing this in regards to the budget. The municipality wants to increase our tariffs, but are not prepared to take any action against those that they're friends with. This is totally unfair.
Yeah, look, Assad, very different to disagree with your point, because if anything, government is the one that is sitting on the big purse, right? They're the ones that are getting the monies that are generated from tax that is paid by you and I. Tsepo, again, the same question I asked to Assad. What do you think then can be the role of ratepayers associations when trying to have this problem addressed?
Okay, Casey, first and foremost, here we are dealing with the people. I'm talking about this government that is failing to govern, because failure to govern often lead to man-made problems that we are talking about. Now we don't have a load shedding all of a sudden. So if they can actually start to be honest with the people that they're leading and observing the constitution of this country. My biggest problem is with this government of the day, they don't want to address issues based on legislation and government. One, they don't want to engage or encourage the ratepayers association, organizations, or the communities in issues of local government. And that on its own is a contravention of Section 152, subsection 1E, that says to encourage the involvement of communities and community organizations in the matters of local government. It further says on subsection A to provide democratic and accountable government for local communities. So, if they don't want to switch, say, for example, health or the hospitals, what about those sick patients who are at home depending on oxygen? They're killing people in Swan. They've killed people in Swan. We didn't open cases yet, but they've killed people because when they come down to the local people, they just come with law enforcement agencies as if they are hard-end criminals. Whatever they do to the local people, which are the residents or the ratepayers, they must do to the government, because they know their purse. They know the budget which is presented in the parliament. They know exactly who owes them. Even the embassies, even the very same councillors who are encouraging people to make arrangements on estimated bill. When I'm closing, the crux of the issue here, all the amounts that you are mentioning, the billions that are owed, they are all estimated bills. The biggest question is, how are we punished for estimations? Why is the local government punishing the resident on estimated bills and making us to pay for the government departments? It is not fair. Whatever they do with us, they must do with the government departments, because those bills are all faulty and they don't want to engage us and they're violating the constitution. That is the biggest problem in South Africa.
All right. Tsepo, thanks for that contribution. I want to take a couple of WhatsApp voice notes that our listeners have sent through before I take a few of the callers that have already been lined up.
Morning, Sis Cathy. I'm listening to your show there of the municipal future. No, it's surprising what the government is owing to the local municipality. Where I'm staying at the Kurleni. When we are owing even 500 or 4,000, they come and disconnect your electricity. So I'm so surprised. And even when we are trying to pay 1,000 each every month, they wanted you to pay 0. But to the government, when they say government is owing those billions, so I'm surprised. Thank you, Mr. Sisketwe. Have a nice show.
Hi, Cathy. This is Daniel Joshua Challen, a resident of KZN, municipality of eThekwini. You know, I've been hearing cries of people at all radio stations and different programs on the absorbent amount they're collecting for electricity. People that have got 1-2 people living in the house and paying absorbent figures, and go to the rent office to query it, and they say, no, you got to pay that amount and then we'll do something about it later. Are these people paying the absorbent figures to cover up for what the government is not paying for the usage of electricity in eThekwini? And these people don't pay, they're being cut off. So why can't eThekwini do the same to the council? Is there different laws for the government or residents of the municipality? So that should not be so, because our constitution treats everybody alike. If the government uses the service, they need to pay for it. Thank you and God bless you.
Good morning, Katie and the SAFM listeners. It's Bongani Nkosi at Paula Ochis Mpumalanga. Katie, it's simple. The municipality should switch off the government department that does not pay the services that they consume. It's simple, straightforward. They should set an example that should be followed by us, the residents. Thank you, Katie, for a nice show as always. Keep it up. SAFM forward.
All right. Thanks for those different contributions. And I agree with the sentiment of our listeners who say, well, why does it need thinking on the part of government departments when residents are not given that kind of treatment? Anonymous, you are in the Eastern Cape. I understand that you're an employee of a municipality. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Good morning, Cathy.
Yes.
Yes, I am. And for my part in my municipality, I am paying 6,000 rand every month, inclusive of rates, taxes, and the usage.
Mm-hmm.
So municipalities do implement their policies. One, the problems, Kathy, are historic. The facilities or buildings, if you go to health, the clinics were built by municipalities. And that mandate was taken over by the province. Those clinics have not been transferred to the province. So the Department of Health finds it difficult to pay for a facility that is not theirs. That's one part that calls for administrative checkup.
Okay, but who, just before you move on, Anonymous, who is occupying that building?
Who's occupying that building is the Department of Health.
Yeah, but surely then it becomes a non-brainer that they should pay, just in the same way that any tenant would pay for property that they're occupying.
When they do account and when Auditor General visits them on the other side, they must show in their property list that those clinics are registered as theirs. They do not appear.
Yes, so but Anonymous, the ownership conversation surely would be a different conversation. If you're occupying a property and are using services of that property, then surely the onus on you is to pay. No?
Yes, it is. But unfortunately, as for accounting purposes, it exposes them, Kathy. I want them to pay. But I'm saying the first thing that we can do is to correct these administrative glitches that are in the system, that properties were developed by public works, they are used by a different department, properties were developed by municipalities, they are used by, when it comes to payment for rates, beside the usage of electricity and water, it's a different story and they must account for it. But what you can do, Kathy, in appreciation of your program that is consistent, get to a social agreement with SALGA. SALGA must enforce the municipalities to report, to develop a separate item. When they are to approve their budget, they must enlist all properties and name the departments that they belong to and ensure that indicate whether they are paying or not paying. Quantify the figure in the budget that would come from the municipality. In that way, on quarterly basis, these departments would be exposed, named and shamed, so to speak, through government process, because in there they will be held accountable. Councillors are exposed, communities are exposed that this department is not doing the payment. But also, municipalities must finalize these transfers between them and provincial departments. They must finalize the transfers of ownership of these properties. Then in that way, there's not going to be conflict in the department of people being scared to sign off the payments because it will be unauthorized. Third one, for the police, because they are now occupying private properties, they are no longer occupying government properties. In those cases, any individual private person who gives a lease to a government department, he must know that the debt will follow the user. So his property will be switched off. But municipality now has to talk to these individuals that are giving leases to government departments, that we will follow the police even if you are paying as a private owner. But for as long as you are housing police, we will switch you off the headquarters.
Okay. Anonymous, thanks for that contribution. Before we take the rest of our callers, Councillor Ntulu, I just want you to weigh in on this administrative issue that Anonymous has raised. Is that part of the reason why there's a difficulty with collecting these monies?
Oh, in our case in the province, we were not aware of such. As I've mentioned, that the interaction between municipalities and the government departments, which happens more often, we will never indicate that there are good reasons for not paying for the services, except that the issues of invoices will be sorted out, and then they will pay what they say we can pay for now, and then we'll pay the other amount, the next tranche on the other month, of which we are saying in terms of using services, they use services on daily basis, and it's important that they pay for the services on monthly basis, not to leave the debt to escalate to such a higher amount. But the issues of transfers and the likes, they've never been an issue. That is why when we approached the Premier and the MEC for the province were in the office, there were never such issues which were raised, except that there was a commitment that they would be pushing government departments, to actually pay. You know, the other wrong thing, Cathy, is that, you see, for those schools that are receiving water, the department, when realizing that they are owing a lot of money, they decided to introduce the boreholes to schools, but not sacking the debts that you have already accumulated. Then that is what I spoke about when I was saying I don't think there is politically a will to do what is right.
Okay. Xolani, you're in the Eastern Cape. Good morning.
Hi, Cathy. We complicating, I think the government wants to complicate what they once simplified. We use prepaid in the Eastern Cape in most residents. And some of us who are in this more SMME space where we also pay for these services, we use prepaid. Why then doesn't the municipality introduce the prepaid systems to every single building and make it compulsory, so that everyone who uses the building must pay when that those units are finished? And the other thing, if it's that too complicated for the government departments to do that, why can't they centralize the payment wherein this is done at a national level? Because it would be very easy for them to provide just the unit numbers to load into those boxes, instead of this to and throwing.
Okay.
In terms of that's how they should just make this simple for everybody.
All right, Xolani, thanks for that contribution. Nkululeko, you are in Danhauser. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Good morning to your listeners. How are you?
I'm good, Nkululeko. Go for it.
Cathy, it's very concerning. It's very concerning that government departments can owe the municipalities such an amount of 3 billion plus 3 billion rand. It is very concerning, and it shows that these departments are untouchable and are above the municipalities or the Department of Culture. Because if they are not paying, it means that services will lack to people. People are not going to get services on time. People might not get services at all. But the departments are getting services every time. Cathy, if it was an individual or a private business, for that matter, that is owing the municipality, they would cut the services to that institution or to that person. But since it's government departments, nothing is happening. This shows purely that this government is incompetent and has got nothing to offer our people if they fail to pay the rates.
Okay. Nkululeko? Yeah?
Yes.
All right, let's leave it there then. Nkululeko out in Danhauser. Asad, let me come to you for your closing remarks then. What is the way forward?
Look, Cathy, when Tsepo was speaking, I actually resonated with what he said, and I fully support him 100%. boils down to a governance issue. And the fact that these municipalities, where they're failing to run them properly and to collect the funds, and there's no political will from themselves, clearly it's a governance issue. And if it is a governance issue, and if they can't do their jobs, then I think the voters need to take a decision and say enough is enough. Something needs to change. We acknowledge all the progress that was made in the last 30 years, but we can't carry on like this. We have to bring about a change.
All right. Thanks for that, Asad. Tsepo?
Cathy, moving forward, we should just do away with this. The prepaid meters, I just want to concur with the caller who said if they can install prepaid meters in households, they must just do it in government. But for now, they must just go and reconnect or disconnect all the government departments the way they do with local people, because those bills are faulty. And the voters must not be fooled by this electioneering by many political parties whom we know that failed us in implementing policies in accordance with the Constitution. We must just change the regime, change all these governments, and get new government which is going to take care of the needs of the people, because we cannot foot the bill of the government. The government is consuming and not paying, but we are made to feel that we are not ones we are willing to pay, but we cannot pay for ESCOM, which was looted by certain criminal activities which took place under everybody's nose. Everybody know what happened. So we just have to vote consciously to avoid such things to move forward.
Okay.
And just going rampantly and disconnect all these government departments. No negotiation with them. They cannot negotiate with them, but fail to negotiate with ordinary residents, especially the poor of the poorest. Thank you, Cathy.
Thanks for that contribution, Tsepo. Councillor Ntuli, you'll wrap it up briefly, please. What then becomes the way forward?
No, thank you very much. We'll continue, SARCA, to make the call and engage with the Office of the Premier so as to try and encourage departments to pay, and even encourage municipalities to switch off services where it's possible. And for Assad, the request for a meeting, I'm not quite sure whether I was referring to my office in KwaZulu-Natal. If then that is the case, if I don't know how he can actually access even my number, so that for the meeting that he indicated that they wanted can sit. But I must thank UKP and SAFM for affording SARCA the opportunity to make the public aware of the challenges that are actually suppressing services that are supposed to go to the people.
And I guess it can't be understated, right, what the impact of all of this is on municipalities and their own ability to carry out their duties and responsibilities to residents who live within their borders. So we'll leave it there with this particular conversation for today. Thank you all for your contributions and also some of the suggestions that you've been making around what then needs to happen to these departments that simply are not willing to pay for their services. We're going to leave it there with this conversation for today. Coming up next is the 11 o'clock news update, and then when we continue, we take a look at the PwC Economic Outlook report for 2024. It says it's not all bad news for South Africa and the economy, especially when it comes to foreign direct investment.
Very much, Cathy. The top stories this hour: the AKA murder suspects await their bail decision and reaction to the suspension of officials in the Master's office. Very good morning. 5 of the accused in the murder case of rapper Keenan AKA Forbes are anxiously waiting to know if the Durban Magistrates Court will grant them bail. AKA was killed along with his friend Tebello Tibbs Motswane outside a restaurant in Durban in February last year. The state and the defense teams have concluded their arguments. In its affidavit, the state says the accused are a flight risk. Legal expert Abigail Ngobeni says the onus is on the defense to prove that the accused deserve bail.
Now it's on them to come with case laws applicable and related to the matter. They also have to come and convince the court that in terms of Section 60, subsection 4 of the Criminal Procedure Act, every factor there does permit, when balancing that with the exceptional circumstances and the interest of justice, it does permit their release on bail. So we're expecting them to come and convince the court. But of course, the state as well will be rebutting that to say that their application do not fit into that subsection, that in that the interest of justice don't permit their release on bail.
The Black Conveyancers Association has welcomed the suspension of officials in the Master's Office. Earlier this week, the Justice Department suspended the officials, including 13 senior managers, in light of an investigation into allegations of maladministration and financial irregularities. The office oversees the administration of deceased individuals' estates, liquidation, and guardianship. Attorney and associate member Dr. Ray Brink says a progressive deterioration in productivity has resulted in a number of problems.
For example, I am aware that some people have been paying bribes to some officials, and that means that their work gets done. And of course, that means they get pushed to the front of the queue and everybody else just doesn't get their work done. So this is particularly important, especially with regard to conveyancing, that's the transfer of properties, because in an estate, typically if there's a property in the estate, that would mean that the delays cause a deterioration and a lowering of the amount that ultimately gets paid to heirs.
Gauteng Community Safety MEC Faith Mazibuko has warned residents who have undocumented migrants on their properties that they will be arrested. She was addressing residents of Olivia Bosch in Centurion yesterday. Mazibuko says that residents should work with the police in identifying migrants who have no documentation. The department spokesperson, Lebogang Lukele.
We're going to work with the Department of Home Affairs when we do our stop and searches or when we're doing our imbizos. When we go to a home and we find that you are harboring illegal foreigners without checking documents, you must take accountability. You must remember that legally, landlords are permitted to use their properties for foreigners, provided the foreigners in the country are legally.
The National Taxi Council, Santaco, has distanced itself from the Scholar Transport operator's planned shutdown in the Eastern Cape. The operator's action is over the Provincial Transport Department's non-payment for their dues. Santaco says its members will operate normally today. Last night, the department released a statement in which it appealed to the operators to reconsider their action. The department says the non-payment is due to technical glitches. And scientists at Cambridge University have recreated the face of a Neanderthal woman who lived 75,000 years ago. The lifelike model was built from a crashed skull, which was discovered in a cave in the Khalistan region of Iraq. The BBC's Rebecca Morell has more.
When the Neanderthal skull was found in the cave, it had been crushed flat and broken into hundreds of tiny fragments. Scientists have now painstakingly pieced them back together, and from this, paleo artists have made a 3D reconstruction of the Neanderthal's face. It reveals an older female with a large brow ridge and wide nose. She's been called Shanadar Z. Her teeth are particularly worn down, and scientists think she may have been in her mid-40s, a considerable age at this point in prehistory. The researchers believe the cave may have been a burial site where groups of Neanderthals carefully placed their dead.
The top story this hour: 5 of the accused in the murder case of rapper Keenan aka Forbes are anxiously waiting to know if the Durban Magistrates Court will grant them bail. For SAFM News, Kemudupi Makhalemeli.
It's been 30 years since we took our first steps towards a better life together.
We've been building homes, restoring dignity together. Millions now have access to education, water, electricity, telecommunications, and improved social security together. We are investing in jobs for our people, making sure no one is left behind. We are renewing our state institutions and turning the tide on corruption together. We are building a better Africa and a better world together.
So let's do more together. Vote ANC.
This political election broadcast was brought to you in terms of the CASA regulation governing the election period. The views expressed in this political election broadcast are those of the political party and not of the SABC.
Rewind the years and relive all the action on the A-Team. Don Hannibal Smith leads the team of 4 members of a former commando outfit. His plans may be unorthodox, but they're effective. Lieutenant Templeton Pegg, second in command, a smooth-talking conman, and the appropriator of vehicles and other useful items. The team pilot, Captain Howling Mad Murdoch. Howling Mad. His name says it all. Sergeant First Class Mr. T, the team's strongman and mechanic. Join them as they embark on epic adventures and missions, all in attempts to clear their names, weekdays at 12. Channel your inner A game with the A-Team, only on S3.
Be part of the 17th Annual SA Sport Awards under the theme Celebrating 30 Years of Freedom Through Sporting Excellence, with great prizes to be won every week. All you have to do is SMS A, B, C, D, or E to 32020 to vote for your favorite People's Choice Nominee of the Year. SMS is charged at R1.50. Free SMSs do not apply. The nominees are A. Eben Etzebeth, B. Gerdestein, C. Siamtanda Siya Kolisi, D. Pensi Tau, E. Kirsten Neuschafer. SMS A, B, C, D, or E to 32020. Voting line closes at 9 p.m. on the 5th of May 2024. T's and C's apply. For more information, visit dsac.gov.za. Catch the SA Sport Awards on Sunday, 5th of May on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 1 at 7:30 p.m. Proudly brought to you by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. SABC Sport is the official broadcaster of the SA Sport Awards. Hashtag Isinja's Game. Hashtag SASA 17th edition.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
It's 8 after 11 o'clock. Welcome to the final hour of the Talking Point. Coming up in this hour, we are unpacking the Economic Outlook report for 2024 compiled by PwC and its findings. Cathy Pai is a senior economist for PwC South Africa. Cathy, good morning to you. Thanks for your time today.
Hi, Cathy. It's really, really good to talk to you, and good morning to your listeners.
So often when we talk about the economy, of course, it seems that there's hardly any good news around, which is why it was important for us to actually have this conversation, because it seems that there are some, glimmers of hope, silver linings for the pessimists, really.
No, that's exactly true, Cathy, and I think this is part of the reason why we actually wanted to do this. To actually, to tell a good story, because certainly, while we have the problems that we have, and of course there are many of them, there are some really positive things and positive developments, and things that actually, if we think about it, we should latch into, because I think when everybody knows if you focus on the negative, you're hardly going to do anything. But if you see some of the positive things, then it gives you some momentum or some impetus to actually do better. And we think that, foreign direct investment is one such story.
Of course, again, Cathy, when it comes to foreign direct investment, often we hear about, investment flights, or, investors that are simply running away from the South African economy. If you listen to some political parties, they'll say, well, it's because of our labor laws. I'm seeing a picket now around the minimum wage and how that is making life difficult for businesses in South Africa. The state of our electricity grid certainly has also brought in its own unique set of challenges. But when people like yourselves at PwC look at our outlook, what is the view when it comes to foreign direct investment?
I think there are two things there. The first one is here we reflect on net. So certainly there's no doubt that there are people actually who take out their money. And that's obviously natural. When certain businesses, for example, find it hard, depending on your sector, because some sectors might be hit harder than others, or some investments, sort of people looking at this and saying, well, actually, I can make better money, because it's not only that when people take their money out of South Africa, they're specifically reflecting on South Africa. They may be seeing other opportunities where their money can earn more, where there's that relative gain that we are looking at. There's that. There's also some people who are looking at other geographies and they're saying, look, actually, we can do better in South Africa despite those challenges. One can imagine that there are places in the world that are doing much worse than us in different kinds of areas, and they think that they bring their money to South Africa. And therefore, when we think net inflow, so we are talking about those who have taken their money, those who've brought in money, and we are saying in this report, actually, on balance, there's been actually over the past 13 years or so, that actually on balance there has been a net increase into South Africa. So that's the one thing. And that has been that. And then the second thing is that those companies who are in South Africa who are actually bringing in money, those are also looking at, for example, expansion. They can see the opportunities, how successful they've been, and they look at everything else because businesses will always have challenges here. Regardless, and they look at those at the opportunities they have, and they look at the challenges they may face, and then they say, on balance, actually, we think this is still a good geography. We are still able to make money. Our returns are still positive, and therefore, what we do want to do is to add to that. Remember, for example, if you think about the energy situation, there are some businesses that are able to look at that and say, well, this is a huge challenge. But as part of what we are going to do, because we think we still see returns in South Africa, let us actually invest in the energy space for ourselves to make sure that we actually are building up our own capacity to generate so that we can continue to enjoy the spoils that we came here for. And of course, it's not easy for many businesses to leave because once you've set up a factory and you've set up a plant, you can't actually pick that plant up on a spade and put it on an aeroplane. And so you find that actually, let me evaluate and see what I can do. And certainly, as we go on with the conversation, I think there's opportunity to delve into that. But certainly, one of the key things is really that most businesses do that. It's different for us as ordinary people because we can always focus on the negative and say, if it was me, I would leave. But it's much more complicated than that.
Yeah, as you're speaking, Kanti, thinking about the recent news around Anglo and, this proposal for an acquisition that has been made by BHP Billiton. But, of course, there seems to be a condition there that they would let go of their South African assets. Others are saying, well, it just means an unbundling of the South African assets. But the reasons that have been given for that is what I'm more interested in, because it's been used as a case study to say, well, actually, this is why business is no longer interested in South Africa. And it's, again, an example of the narrative around why South Africa is becoming less and less attractive to foreign investment.
I think you raise a very good point here, and I think it's a very good example to think about the mining sector. The mining sector has had certain challenges, especially around the legislation, and people have been very upset about that. But there's been ongoing negotiations at that, whether it's BE, whether it's also sort of some kind of discussion that's been there. But also many miners recognize that South Africa has still a huge wealth of what is now known as critical minerals. So the minerals, for example, that are helping us to to create phones, to create power, battery storage, those kinds of things, lithium, we know manganese, very, very, these kinds of minerals that are actually the minerals of the future. One of the key things there has been, how do you actually make sure you support exploration? So how do you create an environment where people can explore and find these minerals and therefore exploit them? So that tells us one thing, that's an opportunity there. Then, of course, there's these challenges that people will highlight about, the regulatory environment, how easy it is, for example, to do it, because people put in a lot of money to be able to explore and to dig up a mineral and be able to put it to market. So that balance is something that obviously is important to look at. And one says, what is the outlook of the mining sector? Many people will say it's positive because we have these minerals that are so needed around the world. to power up the future. So that's one area. And another area, of course, is that these guys look at this and they look at this business and they say this business that was born in South Africa has great infrastructure. It's got there's a lot of opportunity within this business in other areas to be able to do that. And some people, for example, will say, look, I can invest in a South African business because while it may not represent a South African opportunity, so I can have, for example, here is a bank in South Africa, but that bank is actually able to do business not just in South Africa, but in the rest of the continent. So I want to invest in that business. So there is a number of things that are considerations. But there's also around discussions where people will find. Just recently, I had an opportunity to speak to senior international leadership of South Africa, a big retailer in South Africa, and they are looking at their business and they are looking at it and saying, what are the challenges in South Africa and what is the outlook? Because it's not only that we have the challenges of today. What will those challenges look like in the next 3 years and in the next 5 years? I mean, no business invests for a year. They have an outlook. Actually, I remember the CEO asked me, if South Africa was a share, would you buy it or sell it? And my view was that you'd hold because we can see the reforms are coming. And so hold because you are expecting that things are going to be positive. I know, for example, in the news, we saw VW themselves. VW South Africa is adding 5 billion rand into the South African market to make sure that they are actually preparing for extended production of new models and so that they can export those. Now, they may not be able to sell all of those models in South Africa, but they know that they can manufacture in South Africa because they've got that kind of environment. But while they may not have, for example, South Africa doesn't have the strong buying power, the motor sector in South Africa hasn't performed well, but they know that the manufacturing can happen here, but they will sell those things in the export market. So the dynamics are really important to look at. And that's why I say, it may be that we're facing certain challenges as South African consumers under pressure, but not all consumers are under pressure. But South Africa can still have the right kinds of wages. When we say in South Africa wages are high, the minimum wage is high, but you and I may have that discussion another time. But certainly, we know that at least the research that has come out about minimum wages is that minimum wages has been helpful to lift wages of people, to lift living standards of people, and have been done very, very little to lose jobs. You may have seen some jobs being lost, but what we do want, of course, is to lift the minimum standards of people. We don't want people to be the working poor, as it were. So there certainly is opportunity, and many businesses see that, whether they see the opportunity of investing in South Africa because they want the South African consumer or the Southern environment, or they know that this is a place from which they can export. Another area where people have been investing has been, in call centers. We're talking to another client comes from India, and they were saying to us they are really keen here. And one of the things that comes out is that South Africa is well placed because our accent makes a lot of sense to a lot of people, right? I mean, South Africans speak English well, and our accent is much more palatable. You can hear it better than most. I mean, you and I know it's very difficult sometimes to hear Americans. It's very difficult, for example, maybe to hear an Indian accent, or it's certainly a British accent, but the South African accent is a sort of neutrality. So we look at all of those things and we say, actually, there are many things and many factors that are important that actually contribute to South Africa being a good investment destination.
Okay.
And that is something that people look at.
So, Kanti, when we continue, I want us to look at perhaps, even though it's not necessarily individual businesses, but I want us to look at the broad trends that make the business case for why people continue to invest in South Africa. So what is it by and large that is working, that is attracting this investment into the country? We'll continue the conversation with PwC economist Cathy Mohlahlana in a moment.
Nna lebitso la ka ke Bonolo Moahlodi Bantswang ba re ke Miss B, morara Miss T Moahlodi, the Bonnie B Bonbon, and we'll be now playing Kena on Mondays at 4:30. The day has changed, but the time slot hasn't. So if you're interested in news that's happening with us kids and our peers around the world, don't forget to tune in. See you there.
The debate of universities will be witnessed on the field of play. The varsity derby between Amatax ladies and UJ ladies. Who are the most intelligent students? This is the Hollywood Bet Super League. Catch the queens of the beautiful game. University of Pretoria ladies versus University of Johannesburg ladies on Sunday 5 May at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
We're looking at the Economic Outlook report for 2024 that has been put together by PwC, and of course the story that it tells, particularly about South Africa's foreign direct investment, is that on the net effect of FDIs that have come into the country has certainly been very positive over a period of time. Kanti, why did you look at mostly after the global financial crisis?
Yes, I will look at after the global finance crisis because I think many people will recognize, of course, that was the hugest disturbance in terms of investment. The global financial crisis almost shifted the way people think about the world. There's certain geographies. In South Africa, we went through that relatively better because our banking system in particular, where this whole crisis was centered around banking and the banking assets. South Africa went there unscathed because of the way we regulate. So our regulatory environment was so robust that it allowed the banks to survive without as much destruction as we saw in the rest of the world. And that's one area that is very important in the question that you raised at the beginning. Why actually are they coming here? So our regulatory environment, they seemed to be very obtainable about. They say also that governance, I know many of us will say, governance, what governance? But on a relative basis, we continue to actually be better governed than many geographies, especially obviously on the continent, and that's something that they find positive. And I think we can, they call it public sector governance is moderately positive. That's what we see. From Bloom Consulting, this is one of the sources that we use in this research. But we also know that we've seen it also in the rankings in the World Bank, that we actually score quite strongly in terms of issues of investor protection and corporate protection. Now, investment protection is very important, Cathy, as you know, because if you are going to bring your money into any geography, you want to know that you are protected, that the government is not going to swoop in and take over your assets. It's not going to swoop in and close your bank accounts or and do something that's crazy that could actually lead to the loss of your investment. So those protections are quite strong, and they really speak to obviously that constitution that really it takes very seriously private property and the rights of people's ownership. That's one critical area that there is them. There's also just positive perceptions of our economic environment and our business system. And that's not surprising because we know, if you think about it, our banking sector is healthy. Our ability for people to do business everywhere. I know, for example, one area that we usually complain about is how easy foreigners can come here and set up businesses and do well, while South Africans don't do well. And I suspect that they look at where they are and they say, look, if I go to South Africa, I can register a business online, be able to open a bank account, and be able to trade immediately, and I have access to to transport, good roads. So all of those things that actually allow people in business to be able to do business are actually all there. So you do see a sense there that there's a very, very positive, there's a positive, or relatively positive outlook for South Africa. We may be comparing in other geographies, not in Asia, for example. Certainly in Africa, we're doing very well. And so many businesses can set up in South Africa, make sure they are established, and they may use that base to access other geographies for the work that they want to do. So those are some of the things that are coming up very, very well in terms of being able to set up facilities. We've got obviously plenty of land, there's water. And even though we have challenges, as I said, in energy and logistics, these have not been challenges that are insurmountable. So while we may have trains that are not working very well, our road network is good enough to put trucks on it to be able to get your products around. So those are the kinds of things that we see that have been positive for investment in South Africa.
All right. Don't say that there's water, it might just trigger a whole host of calls from our listeners. So please choose your words carefully. Kanti, I'm interested to know which sectors have benefited the most from this investment.
Sure. There are three main sectors, and I think as I want to get to that, I think not only these sectors that we are talking about have been the great contributors. I suspect that we could do more. I think if we put our minds to it, there's sectors with such great potential to gain. So mining and quarrying, of course, that's a big important sector for South Africa. So that has been a big sector that almost takes a quarter of all investment that comes to South Africa, mining and quarrying. Then there's manufacturing at 38%. As manufacturers, we've been doing this for a very long time. Sometimes in some areas not competitive. In other areas we are competitive. I mentioned, for example, the area of motor manufacturing or vehicle car manufacturing. We do very, very well there, and we continue to see a lot of investment from big brands like BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Volkswagen. We see a lot of that. We see a lot in manufacturing. And then finance and insurance and real estate. That speaks to, for example, investment that's being made in the banking system. So banks here who are coming in here to participate, or who are adding their investment or buying stakes. Because investment is not just setting up factories, but also recognizing that the companies that are already in South Africa are doing well and they are showing good profits. And so people, for example, will then put in their money in those, buy shares in those businesses. That's some of the things that we see. And then you see, and then business services. When I spoke to about, for example, setting up call centers, business process externalization, where people say, look, in this part of my business, I don't want to actually have this here. Maybe this part of the business I could externalize to South Africa. So the people who call my customers, the people who maintain my relationships, maybe somewhere else. So that is a key area. Transport, storage, and communications, telecommunications, no doubt about that. We know we've got some of the strongest businesses there. So those kinds of sectors are there. I suspect, Cathy, that there's a great opportunity. Even we see, for example, only 0.2% went to agriculture, and I suspect actually our agricultural sector is really ripe for the picking. I know there's been a lot of talk, for example, that people from the Arabs have been very keen on the South African market to come in here and invest in food production, because these are areas that they don't have. I mean, many of them are obviously in the desert, and they're always looking for food. And they think, look, why don't we invest in South Africa to produce these products? I suspect if they did that, we will be in such a good position, because agriculture is a great spinner for jobs, in particular, especially for low skilled kind of jobs. Even though, of course, over time, part of the agricultural sector requires a lot of skills. So there's also opportunity in other areas. Wholesale and retail is there as part of a still small. Again, another area that if we did well in making sure that we are putting the right kinds of infrastructure, we are supporting infrastructure, we could do much better. But for now, finance and insurance, mining and quarrying, and manufacturing, transport and storage, those have been the big earners of investment.
All right. We'll continue our conversation with Kanti Pai in a moment. I see some of you have already started to send through questions and contributions to this conversation. I'll, of course, be taking your calls on 086 000 2032 is the number to dial, 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. That's where I'll be taking your WhatsApp voice note. So, yeah, certainly good to hear, part of the story that we can tell about the South African economy, especially when looking at foreign direct investment. It's edging towards 11:30. It's time for the latest news headlines. We'll continue with this conversation in a moment.
Thanks, Cathy. Very good morning. With the news headlines, ke Modupi Makgalemele. The Public Service Commission Chair, Professor Somatota Figeni, says he supports former President Thabo Mbeki's call for a national dialogue on the country's challenges. 5 of the accused in the murder case of rapper Keenan aka Forbes are anxiously waiting to know if the Durban Magistrates Court will grant them bail. And traffic has been disrupted on some major roads in the Eastern Cape due to the scholar transport operators shut down. I'll be back with all the details at midday.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
All right, we continue the conversation on the Talking Point. Interestingly enough, some of the questions that are already coming through center on the issue of jobs. Our guest is PwC economist Cathy Pai, and we're taking a look at their recent assessment, the PwC Economic Outlook Report for 2024. It was a report released earlier on in the week. So I'll take your questions for Cathy. I want to kick it off with Colin. Colin, you're out in Cape Town. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Cathy, and your guest. You know, I'm a confused person now listening to this gentleman talk now. I listen every night to business and all this and that on the radio. Economists, top economists and top business people. Pick and pay all over the country. All top business. I make it my duty to listen to that. But I'm confused now what I'm hearing from your guest. GDP. Why isn't it not growing? And if everything is going so hunky-dory, investment is coming into this country. Why is our unemployment rate going up? Manufacturing, I can understand. It's motor cars, expensive luxury motor cars. But why are we importing more into the country than exporting? We should be exporting much more than what we import. Our steel works, our manganese, everything like that. We used to melt down in our country. ISCO and those people used to melt down our own steel and everything, our raw materials. We used to manufacture engineering. We had engineering companies in this country which we haven't got anymore to manufacture. What we export to China and all over the world comes back to us at 3, 4, 5 times the price. Now, if we are doing so well, where is our textile, our clothing industry? Why are they shut down? Our roads are atrocious. Our rail system, the farmers can't get their stuff to the harbours. They're losing billions of rands. So I can't understand your guest that people are flocking to invest here.
Okay.
Our unemployment is so high. Our GDP is not even growing. Thank you, Cathy.
All right, Colin, we'll leave it there. I want to play this voice note that I think also feeds into Colin's question for Cathy, and then we'll take some of the other issues that you want to raise.
All good and well that one says that direct investment is coming into the country. Is this Chinese direct investment? Does this equate to jobs? Or is it just money that's going to go to cadres or the ANC, where a Chinese can build a factory and employ Chinese workers, and the local populace sit without jobs? Is that the direct investment we're talking about, or are we talking about direct investment that leads to economic opportunities and jobs for people in South Africa? That should be discussed. Economic investment that results in economic growth, A, and B, job creation. That's the only direct investment that needs to be spoken about. Other forms of direct investment, i.e. Chinese or the like, where it doesn't equate to such growth and job opportunities, is irrelevant. Leonard from Pietermaritzburg.
All right, Cathy?
Very difficult questions, but interesting none the same. Quite correct. Let me start from the last question, because I think that is important, and I think we can work ourselves through. is this investment actually creating jobs? The first thing to say, Kathy, is that unemployment is important to understand from the perspective that we when it measures not only those who are employed, but we also look at those who are unemployed. Now, in terms of just the numbers, we see that actually the numbers of people who are employed has been steadily increasing. So there are more jobs that are being created in the economy. Where our problem is that we are just not catching up with the number of people that are entering at the job market. So, for example, if we think about it, just between the year April 2020 to now, that's about 2 million jobs that have been created. But if we think about the number of people that have entered the labor force market in that same period, we recognize that there has been more people who have entered that by a huge factor of about 4 million. So we are struggling because as we look at the number, because of course we have a very young population, Cathy, and they're now getting into the job market and they become part of the labor force. And so our economy, while we are getting this investment, as I said earlier, we see net investment here. So we should be seeing more, but we are seeing some of that capital leave. So our difference between the people who are actually entering the job market and those that are getting employment tells us the unemployment rate. So in that sense, we've got a problem. But it also tells us something that's more important, is that, of course, some of the investment that we have sometimes, is more around issues that can actually be done many times by technology. So whereas before maybe you needed 4 people to make a car, now you need 2 because technology has its footing on the ground, and that's something that's important because it requires then a little bit more thinking. At PwC, we did some work about 2 years ago, where we looked at the period between 2010 and 2020 to see what is the relationship between economic growth and job creation. And we are finding actually that relationship has broken. That if I were to use it, put it in simple terms, for every 10 units of growth, you only get, say, 8 units of jobs. And that means that over a period of time, we are not getting that relationship where we think, as we grow, we're actually growing through employment at sort of equal measure. And that really suggests the restructuring in the economy, the kinds of jobs that are being, the kinds of production that we have. I said earlier that manufacturing is the biggest beneficiary for foreign direct investment. But we know now that we can manufacture very easily sometimes with machines, and that's a problem that's going to continue. But that speaks really to say, as we get this, we have to make sure that we are doing the right kind of skills training, we are doing the right kinds of retraining, so that actually people are not on the whole, this doesn't become on the whole negative, but that we actually get positive gains, because it means that if you, for example, create 2 factories, you are able then to create more factories so that you can absorb as many people as we have. So I think that answers the question that we had from the previous caller in just thinking about that investment in the job creation. The second part comes from Colin, and I think in terms of that GDP that he's talking about and jobs, I'd answer the same thing. And then he also speaks about exports imports outpacing exports. It's quite right. There's been very much all of the talks, and I know you and I, Kathy, we would have heard this many times, about the so-called beneficiation, that we are actually not adding value. But that really requires some help, both from government and the private sector, to think about how to actually invest in technology. One of the things that we saw recently, we did a piece of work recently, and looking just at South Africa's productivity and what are the contributors. And there are many things there, but where we have we are not getting a productivity where we saw a negative or detraction was access, for example, to internet and also to issues of technology, because we haven't, both not just South Africa but the continent, we really have not actually spent enough on making sure we are investing in technology so that people are connected to opportunity. That's something that's quite negative. We know data is still very expensive. Access to infrastructure hasn't been built in the far-flung areas so that people are actually connected to economic opportunity. You can just think about it, for example, in the agricultural sector. if you are, you are farming maize or you have cattle, if you want to be part of the bigger cycle, these things are priced in an international environment. So your maize price, you may not know it. So you are not able to actually take advantage of the big opportunities of what maize costs and therefore how you are able to invest. That's certainly one area. So we have to invest in technology. We have to invest in infrastructure to make sure that we are taking advantage and we are able to add value to the minerals that we export.
Kanti, we're quickly running out of time. I'm going to squeeze in these few voice notes that have come through. And then on the other side of that, I'm going to ask you to please then just give us a brief response to what they might be raising.
Good morning, Cathy, and good morning to your guests. It's Fred the Trucker here in Eastern Cape. Cathy, sometimes, when we talk, because we can talk on SAFM, it's a talk radio station, we need to put facts. Can your guests give us examples of companies that have invested in the past 4 years? Because the proof, we can see it. Companies are packing their bags, they are going, they are retrenching. Mining companies are going, trucking companies are closing because the environment is not suitable. Workers are not being paid enough. How are they going to support these businesses when they are not even having money?
Good morning, Cathy, and your guest. My question this morning is, how does it affect investor confidence having a billionaire as a president? Musa and Joburg, thank you.
Good morning, Cathy and SAFM listeners. I would like to know what your guest's take is on using industrial subsidies to support small businesses as a policy to grow the industrial sector of the country. Thanks. This is Lionel from Woodbank.
All right, Kanti, we've got under 2 minutes for you to respond. Go for it.
Okay. Industrial subsidies are important, Cathy, on the front, but they really help businesses. What we usually think about it as co-risk or de-risk, because you are putting in your own money and you want somebody else to help you because obviously that helps with the risk. So they are very important, especially in an environment for us. We know we have a very low savings rate. So actually government co-investing with you through subsidies is an important part of that. And we've seen it being very, very helpful in many areas. We certainly get it in countries like China who have succeeded. So whether those subsidies, for example, are helping you to buy infrastructure, to buy a machine, to be able to help you or to upgrade your technology as a business. That's very, very important. So he's quite right about that. A billionaire businessman, whether or not that helps with investor confidence, I cannot speak that there's any data to that. So I don't know. It's a very difficult thing. It may be part of the governance situation where maybe people feel that a rich president is not is able to understand business better. So maybe that's the area. I did mention earlier that there's certainly a lot of companies that have come through, that have come on board. Certainly, I know as early as last week, we received a report on vehicle manufacturing, and that VW has done investment. We know BMW is doing the same, Mercedes. So in the car manufacturing space, there is a lot. And we hear over and over again, many companies who come to speak to us as PwC to say, we want to understand this environment because we are very interested in South Africa. So he can rest assured that there's a lot of companies that are coming in to look at this environment, both for South Africa opportunity, but for South Africa as a springboard or as a base to enter the continent, especially as we understand now there's going to be that free trade agreement on the continent. And so people see that investing here may be a very good thing because they'll be able to actually be able to access a big market.
Kanti, there is a final question that I won't expect you to answer, but this listener wants to know, which country is Kanti talking about? All right. On that note, thank you so much for your time and for coming to unpack this report. I guess no surprise that there is so much skepticism around some of its findings because of what is the lived reality of South Africans. So both have to be taken into context. That's where we leave it for today on The Talking Point. The show is back with you again tomorrow. Up next is the book reading.
Catch the Tastemaster SA this Tuesday at 7 on SABC2. After surviving the first elimination challenge, 12 remaining contestants must work in teams to create the ultimate baked gift for Mother's Day. Teamwork, creativity and design all play a role in deciding who comes out on top. That's the Tastemaster SA. Tuesdays at 7, repeat Wednesdays at 1 and Sundays at 4 p.m. on SABC2.
Of the 17th Annual SA Sport Awards under the theme Celebrating 30 Years of Freedom Through Sporting Excellence, with great prizes to be won every week. All you have to do is SMS A, B, C, D or E to 32020 to vote for your favorite People's Choice Nominee of the Year. SMS is charged at R1.50. Free SMSs do not apply. The nominees are A. Eben Etzebeth, B. Gerdestein, C. Siamtanda Siya Kolisi, D. Pensi Tau, E. Kirsten Neuschafer. SMS A, B, C, D or E to 32020. Voting line closes at 9 p.m. on the 5th of May 2024. T's and C's apply. For more information, visit dsac.gov.za. Catch the SA Sport Awards on Sunday, 5th of May on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 1 at 7:30 p.m. Proudly brought to you by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. SABC Sport is the official broadcaster of the SA Sport Awards. Hashtag isn't just a game. Hashtag SASA 17th edition.
The book reading. Please note the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listener's discretion is advised. SFM presents another episode of Why Men Hate Women, written by Kopano Ratile.
In an editorial in a Sunday newspaper, documentary filmmaker Jacqueline Reyners asked a question linked to the central one we have been considering in these reflections, namely, what do you do when people tell you that your boyfriend is a rapist? Responding to her own question, she wrote, "My rapist was a family member, so I know a little about what it is to love someone who hurt you." She was saying that we can be hurt by people we love. Family members who are supposed to care for us can wound us. The dilemma of having to work out what to do about the rapist in the family as a close colleague or as a friend, whether that rapist has raped oneself or someone else, cannot be exaggerated. We, women or men, cannot always just go ahead and cut out loved ones. We are not always in a position to leave family and others close to us who harm us while claiming to care for us. Even more haunting, because we cannot immediately leave such a situation, is the reality that forgetting and working through the hurt can be complicated. The presence of the rapist is a constant reminder. It is a confounding situation. There will be no easy solutions, not only because of the proximity of the reprobate, but also because there are other family members, friends of the family and wider circles of people who make up our social networks that we have to think about and deal with as victims of the rapist in the family. As scholars and policymakers, we have the freedom to reflect on this entwinement of love and violence. It is always worthwhile in such cases to examine the structural conditions under which people are motivated or subtly compelled toward caring for those who hurt them. At the same time, subjectivities and psychological dynamics of relationships must not be dismissed. Explanations that reduce everything to the effects of social, political, cultural, or economic institutions are as unhelpful as those that attribute everything to individuals and psychological factors. The question of why some women love men who hate them or hate others can be reframed as, why are there men who, it appears, do not care for women or children who care for them? This lack of care is an intentional injury caused to them. Why, that is, do some men hate those whom they are close to? Men hate women they don't know too, of course. While some studies report that they do so at more or less similar rates to the violence they commit against women known to them, other studies show that stranger rape accounts for a higher proportion of violence than violence against women by men who are known strangers. Another study still presents a different picture, with intimate violence reported to be higher than non-partner violence. However, it is the hurting of women by familiar men that is perturbing, because it appears to challenge our beliefs, policies, rhetoric and actions as a state, society and individuals. For instance, in policies, in advertisement and in advocacy campaigns, it is far more common to suggest and represent the perpetrator as an unknown man, because it is troubling to portray him as a husband or grandfather or a teacher, coach or boyfriend. To face the fact that we are likely to be hurt by those close to us, a fellow employee, brother, neighbor or member of the same congregation, is to confront how close we live to violence. But do men actually dislike women or children? Or has violence so infected some men's psyches and social existence that the real struggle is to extirpate it from inside their minds and from our cultural midst? Could it be that men's violence is in fact present because men do not care? Even though I take steps to clarify that my aim is to understand the conditions under which aggression and affection coexist, and I'm sometimes surprised by the outrage I provoke when I ask women the question, why do some women love men who hurt them? I've become extra attentive to how I ask this question. When confronted with the fact that care co-resides in the same subject as wretchedness, that it is not only happiness we experience with those close to us, we have to find a way to either live with a predicament or escape it. To realize that affection coexists with grief in the same relationship, we have to reckon with how to think of our relationships. I'm not expecting any woman or man or have an answer for all of us about how to make all men more loving and less violent. If it is emancipating, tolerable or sensible answers that I'm after, because there is no one final answer, I'm also trying to learn how we are managing to live a life where violence is so close by, so much part of the fabric of the world in which we live. But still I wonder, what kind of love harms you? One answer I arrive at is actually a question leading to further questions, for there can never be a final answer, except the extirpation of violence from our bones, synapses, and relational life. That question is, can peace, love, or joy even be found in a society in which there are so many able-bodied men without decent work, without being cared for, without the slightest prospect of living a dignified life, without education in how to care for others, without representation, without words? This is not at all to say that men's violence against women is inevitable because they do not have decent work, or that men will become more affectionate when society becomes more socio-economically equal. It is to say that these are the conditions under which men become men. To be sure, these conditions shaping how we act from moment to moment are forms of violence too. The structural violence of policies, of institutions, of economic arrangements. The violence, that is, of systems. While recognizing the slow violence of structures, of the social conditions that form our lives, we must be clear that they do not undermine every inch of men's lives. If they did, then among women who grow up in the same society as men, everything else being equal, we would witness corresponding rates of women's violence against men. But we do not in police data at least. Women and men, it seems, experience and react differently to their social and economic conditions. That is to say, society, our parents, priests, teachers, media, peers, workplaces, construct us to be different kinds, to think differently about what it means to be women or men. I'm aware that research indicates that men's violence is associated with their support of gender inequality, with patriarchal views and practices that hold and show men to be superior to women. I have repeatedly cited this research in my work. There is something I still believe about that association. However, it seems that things are more complicated than I have led myself to believe, especially in practical life. They always are. But they are also complicated when you look closely into what people report in the research. A few years ago, in a survey of over 1,700 men and women that my students and I conducted, I found that the overwhelming majority of South African men and women report that they believe in the equal treatment of women and men. Yet the country continues to suffer from high levels of men's violence against women. If a man can report egalitarian views and still commit violence against a woman, how is gender inequality precisely related to gender violence? I believe I do not understand the association as well as I thought I did. The relationship seems more complicated. Equality is more complicated. The drivers and pathways of men's violent behavior toward women are more complicated. Conflict and suffering come with being human and relating to others. There is no love where one of the parties never hurts the other party at all. For where else does our earliest suffering go? We already know that parents do experience violent feelings towards their own children, and that young children harbor rage against the parents who take care of them. I know it is an uncomfortable hypothesis to advance that violence can never be completely divorced from love, from our being in the world. We should not be afraid to delve into the complications of human relations, though. We always need more understanding about our own mental and affective behavior, our own and others' pain. Here is another hypothesis. It seems that we will not be able to stop violence in my country, in the world, because those who govern the world are really not invested in equality, although it might